Hi, I'm Kristen. Welcome and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be sharing all of the new releases that I have read so far this year and categorizing them as either fabulous, fine, or a flop. I do have my door open today because it is really muggy. So if you hear background noises or pigeons cooing, I apologize today. It's just too warm to have my door closed. I am actually both a tough and easygoing rater. It's why I don't really share most of my ratings with you because they're very personal to me. It's really tough for me to give out a 5. I feel like that has to be like a fantastic book that I absolutely loved, but I also don't give out a lot of 2s or 1s either. So I will share whether or not this was a 5, a 4, or a 3, but it wasn't perfect in terms of fabulous, fine, and flop for whether that was a 3, a 4, or 5. There's a method to my madness. I just can't quite explain it. Starting off with Flamefall by Rosaria Munda. This is a young adult fantasy book, the second book in the Aurelian cycle. This was one of my 2 most anticipated releases for the first half of the year. I absolutely loved Fireborn, and Flamefall did not disappoint. I would absolutely rank this one a fabulous. I did give it a 5-star on Goodreads as well. This book kept the perfect tone from the first book. The characters have changed, they have grown, but they have not become different people. They are still who they were in the first book. They've just had more experiences that have shaped them. This is both heartbreaking and wonderful. It is a very political series, but not political in the scheming, manipulative, power hungry, or like plotting, planning vibes that we think of when we often say political. This is more actually political in that these are people, our main characters have a high role in the government, and we spend a lot of time looking at how government actions are determined and the impact of the decision-making process on the people responsible in power, responsible for making the decisions that are impacting all of the population of this world or this country. Then we have Namesake, which is the second most anticipated release that I had for the first half of the year. I also read Fable last year, the first book in this duology by Adrian Young. This one I ended up giving a 4 on Goodreads, and I would categorize this one as fine. It did not quite live up to my expectations from the first book. It was set up that we were going to be focusing a lot more on the mother-daughter relationship between Fable and her deceased mother, Isolde. And while we did wrap up that storyline, it was wrapped up rather quickly, and it was not nearly as much of a focus, that relationship, as I thought it was going to be. There were also a lot of things that happened with Fable's relationships in this book that felt a little bit too quick for it being just a duology. This is both her relationship with the love interest as well as her relationship with the crew. The first book wasn't necessarily found family, but it felt like it was about to break into the found family. So I was really looking forward to strong crew vibes in the second book. And based on stuff that is happening within the plot and with how a certain character reacts to some stuff, there is not like amazing crew vibes. There's actually a lot of crew tension, and I just felt like that was too quick of a shift from the first book for that to be, again, ending with a duology. So while I did enjoy this book, it didn't quite live up to my expectations, and I would ultimately categorize this as fine. Then we have Winter's Orbit by Evarina Maxwell. I also gave this book a 4 on Goodreads, and I would categorize this as fine as well. This is a sci-fi romance book. It is a male-male political marriage setup. I thought it was really cute. The relationship was really well developed over the course of the book. It spent a lot of time focusing on how your past relationships and experiences can shape how you act and react in new relationships. There was a bit of a murder mystery plot to this book as well, and that is where I would say the not so great things about the book were. They weren't terrible, but it was just sort of like not fabulous. And that is because a lot of the murder mystery context is based in and around this sort of intergalactic government setting that we didn't have all of the information for. So it made some of the reveals where the characters were really surprised and shocked not land quite the same to me, the reader. And then we have A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas. I did live react to this book in a reading vlog. You can check that out. And I would categorize this book also as simply fine. It by no means lived up, in my personal opinion, to the earlier books in the series. It was excessively long for how much plot and story there actually was, even though this is obviously a book about character trauma, growth, and overcoming past experiences and your own personal hang-ups about stuff. Even with all of that, it just was still way too long. We did not need to hear all of the ins and outs of her working out. It wasn't bad, I did enjoy it, but I actually think even when I originally was reacting to this video, I described it as like, that was fine. And I gave this a 3 on Goodreads. And then I read A Crown of Gilded Bones by Jennifer L. Armentrout. This one I also gave a 3, but I would describe this one as a flop. The first 2 books in this series are fun. They are kind of bingeable, they are smutty, they are tropey, the plot is okay, the relationship is predictable but enjoyable to read about, there's great sexual tension, and it was enough of like a fun, just bingeable, junk food sort of experience that I really enjoyed them and was quite anticipating this 3rd book in the series. I actually thought it was going to be a trilogy, turns out no. And then this book was just more of the same, but it had kind of lost both the sexual tension and angst of the first 2 books. This whole book is just having the same conversations over and over and over again. It added in so much new information at the beginning that in the beginning was way high drama and action, and then it slowed way down for like the middle 300, 400 pages. The sexual tension was gone. There was what I thought was going to be sexual tension in a new dynamic that did not happen. If you read this series, you know what I'm referring to, and that better happen in the 4th book. And then again, she ramped up the action and drama at the end of the book so that you feel like you need to know what happens next, and I don't like being played around like that. There was not enough going on in that book that I should not feel interested in what happens next, but I am because of that ending. So I will begrudgingly probably read the next book, but this one kind of lost me on it for the series. Then we have The X-Talk by Rachel Lynn Solomon. This is a contemporary romance book. It is a hate to lovers romance and also a bit of an age gap. It's not a huge age gap, but there's a little bit of an age gap, and the female is older as well, if that is important to you. I really enjoyed this one. I think that I gave it a 4 on Goodreads, and it would be a 4 that I think was fine. It had great sexual tension. The hate to love was really good, and it wasn't that obvious like, oh, he's always secretly liked you, but there was a misunderstanding and so she hated. It wasn't that. Like, they actually like didn't really get along, and over time they got super into each other. There were a couple things though that made this not a fabulous for me, and that was the excessive use of the word millennial and the excessive use of contemporary references that really took me out of the book. The 2 characters in this book, they are in an NPR style radio program, and they are forced to do a program where they pretend to be exes, but they actually have never dated. Their show was insanely popular, but they had only done 3 episodes or 4 episodes. Like, that part I didn't really buy, and that's just me being a little bit nitpicky. Then we have The Mask of Mirrors by M.A. Carrick, and no surprises here if you've watched any of my videos in the last couple months. This is a fabulous, and I rated this a 5 on Goodreads. This is a con artist, high society adult fantasy book, the first in a new series called The Rook and Rose. We have a lot of high society scheming, a lot of politics. There is our main character, Ren, who is this con artist trying to worm her way into one of the noble families. There is a masked vigilante called the Rook And all of the relationship dynamics in this book were so great. Loved this book. Can't wait for the next book. 5, fabulous. No shock there. Then we have People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. And this one, I'm gonna give a fine to. I actually read this book in a single sitting, and I really, really liked where it started. I loved it for the first half of the book, maybe 3/4. But as we went on more and more, the current timeline of the book started to disappoint me a little bit. This is a book about 2 friends. It is a friends to lovers romance, and the setup is that they, for years, would go on a vacation together in the summer, but something happened 2 years ago. They stopped talking, and in the now timeline, they are going on vacation again to try to salvage their friendship. While the development of their relationship, the progress and the angst of the relationship between Poppy and, I'm forgetting his name, I think it's Alex, that over the period of the flashbacks and catching up to what happened 2 years ago was really great, and that is the part of the book that I absolutely loved. The now timeline was a little bit harder. The vibe between them was really uncomfortable and awkward, and not in a great way. And then ultimately I thought that what happened 2 years ago was a little bit disappointing. So People We Meet on Vacation, I gave this a 4 on Goodreads, and I will categorize this one as fine. Maybe fine plus, if I'm feeling generous. Then we have The Counselor by Ej Beaton, which is another adult fantasy book. This was described as a Machiavellian political fantasy, and honestly, she knows what she's talking about. This book was great. I did give this a 4 on Goodreads. I think probably it would be like a 4.5 if I was being really specific, but it's a 4 that I am definitely going to categorize as fabulous. I thought this was an unexpected delight of a book. With each chapter, the intensity of what was happening, the stress kept building and building, and so too did my interest in the book continuously, stepwise increase with each chapter of this book. One thing I didn't have a lot of time to talk about in my wrap-up was the character of Lysande, and I think that that's one area where this book actually really, really shines. Yes, it is a great exploration of power and motivation behind power. It has very beautiful descriptive writing and world building that I think will continue to grow and expand in the next book. But the characterization of Lysande was really great. Lysande is such an interesting new fantasy character. She is very relatable, but she also makes some choices that you feel uncomfortable with. Really interesting new book. Definitely a fabulous, if not quite a 5. Then we have The Bone Maker by Sarah Beth Durst. And this one, I gave a 3 on Goodreads, and I'm gonna call it a flop. This is a book that I thought was gonna be amazing based on the concept. It is a book about the 5 heroes who saved the world, but catching up with them 25 years after the fact, and looking at how that event of them saving the world and everything that happened with that has shaped who they have become. We look at the impacts of that experience on their lives. There were a lot of things about this book that really didn't work for me. There is a certain amount of distance to the characters that makes me less connected with both the characters and the book. There was really, really minimal world building here, and that's something that I'm not a huge stickler for, but it was almost non-existent. The pacing and the stakes were very odd and didn't really work for me. I think there are readers out there for this book. It's just not me. And then finally, the last book on the list and the most recent is Cast in Firelight by Dana Swift. This one I gave a 3, and it's also a pretty big flop for me. This book is a young adult fantasy following a witch and a wizard in a political marriage alliance, which is a trope that I usually really, really love. However, this book did not work for me for a lot of reasons. But I will say overall this book felt like it could have used another couple passes from an editor in the sense of the plot and the plot points and how those were all connected. It felt like a lot of stuff was just thrown around here. Not all of the plot points made sense or connected to each other. there was a lot of description lacking, or how things related to each other in the world. The dynamic between the two characters was a bit of a miss for me as well. When they meet in person, they're actually both pretending to be other people, so they don't realize who each other are. And there's several times where they should correct the other person and they never do, and for no reason. Like, there are reasons given, but they're not good reasons. And it took a lot of the tension and angst out of what could have been a really great rivals, enemies to lovers. I thought this was going to be a really fun, tropey, angsty, hate to love romance, and it was not that. It really went in some strange directions on top of all of the convenient and disconnected plot points that happened. This was a pretty big flop for me, and I was pretty disappointed. I actually probably should have just DNF'd it about a third of the way in when I realized it wasn't what I wanted it to be. Anyway, those are all of the new releases that I have read so far this year, and whether or not they were fabulous, fine, or a flop. Thanks for joining today. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you like my videos or enjoyed what you saw here today. I will see you next week